Oye, bienvenidos a Boxeo Palo Positivo por decisión dividida y hoy nos visita, señores, Malissa Smith. Señores, una historiadora de boxeo femenino que conoce, oye, la historia de rabo a cabo, como diríamos en Puerto Rico, y nos visita hoy, nos acompaña para contarnos un poco de esta historia del boxeo femenino que muchos creemos saber, pero hay muchos detalles que definir. Welcome, Malissa. How you doing?
Oh, I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Cesar.
Hey, I was talking to my people, explaining to them how great of a woman boxing historian you are, and talking about then how much you know that we think we know, but we really don't know. It's a lot of details that we can hatch, and we ain't gonna be able to have all them details hatch in this program and in this segment or in this conversation that we will have about women's boxing history and a little bit more. But they can always go and see you, go and get your book, History of a Woman, the History of Women's Boxing, right? Is the only one available. You cannot find nothing else. And I know for a fact that the Bible of boxing declared this the Bible of boxing, a woman's boxing. How, tell us how you started in boxing first.
Well, I have to admit, when I was about 9 years old, my brother and I used to watch wrestling on television, and we just thought it was the greatest. So I learned how to do like half Nelsons and full Nelsons. I mean, this was the early '60s with wrestlers like Bruno San Martino, Gorgeous George, all of those kind of fighters. But very quickly, I gravitated to boxing. As soon as I heard about Muhammad Ali, I loved boxing. Then, when I was about 12 years old, my uncle taught me how to do the 1-2. He's like, okay, that's how you throw a jab. That was the proudest day of my early childhood. It's like, I can do a 1-2. I can throw a jab. How cool is that? What I didn't figure out till I was in my early 40s was that I could also box. So I was always a boxing fan, but I never really made the leap to understand that I could bring myself into a boxing gym and learn the sport, which I started to do in my early 40s at Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn, New York. They were incredibly welcoming and wonderful to me, and I just started contesting the sport. I was as happy as can be. I had real boxing trainers. My first trainer was a guy named Johnny Greenwich, who didn't even believe in focus pads. He was like totally old school. It was just hitting the bag, sparring, and going under the slip rope. That was about it, and getting pounded. So that was really my introduction to the sport. And as I was working at a gym, I suddenly realized, wow, there are a lot of women here. And then I realized they're pros. They're amateur boxers. They're contesting in the Golden Gloves. They're in the first nationals and internationals around the world. So it really piqued my interest. And that's kind of how I got my grounding in the sport.
Melissa, so you're 67 years old right now.
I am
And
67 years old right now, and I go to the gym 2-3 mornings a week.
yeah, and you go to the Gleason gym 2-3 mornings a week and do your boxing. You've been even in the ring sparring and all that. So let's so people know. So you've been over 25 years in the kind of inside boxing, and so
Yeah,
people understand. We can see your background, New York City, so they understand the Gleason Gym has seen a lot of a boxing in there and a lot of a history with all. When you see all these public trainings and all that in New York, they from the Gleason Gym, so you have seen all everybody in boxing basically coming
absolutely.
through
I've
there.
seen Mike Tyson. I've seen you name it. I've seen them. Chocolatito. Lots and lots and lots of boxers come through, and but also a lot of women boxers and a lot of female champions are out of Gleason's gym, like Alicia Ashley, Heather Hardy, Amanda Serrano has trained, was the brilliant Puerto Rican fighter with 7 different belts and 7 different wealth classes. She has trained out of Gleason's from time to time in her career and certainly has done her public workouts there. ahead of her professional bouts at Barclays, at the big venue in Brooklyn called Barclays. So yeah, it's a really exciting place to box with great trainers. I mean, Buddy McGirt is a trainer there. Iran Barkley is a trainer there. So there are some really interesting folks who train at various levels of their career, from young kids who are just starting out and want opportunities in the Junior Olympics to seasoned professionals who are contesting for weight, for belts. And the same thing on the female boxing side. And for me, it's as a, let's say, a recreational boxer more than anything else, it's given me an opportunity to observe and participate in this wonderful community of folks who just care about the sport and care about the betterment of each other.
So we're going to talk about all these great boxers and all these great ladies,
Mm-hmm.
and we're especially going to talk about Amanda Serrano because she fighting this weekend, Sunday,
Yep.
the 29th, in a great card, and all these and all the details. And we need to talk about her because, our program is in her hometown of Puerto Rico, even
Exactly.
though she grew up in New York. And like you said, she trained in that gym. But let's go back to you, to your part of history in boxing, in women's boxing,
Sure.
right? So you started in your 40s. That's when really, like, I'm 48. I'm a retiree just like you, and that's when life start. Really, that's when you get all
That's
this
it.
energy, and you be like, hey, I want to do the things that I probably used to do back in the days, but better, right? So you got
Mm-hmm.
into all this, and you was telling me backstage that you went back to college, and that's
Yes, I
when
did.
this Euro come to life, right?
Yes,
Can, can you
I
can you
was in
explain to
my
people how that happened?
absolutely. I was in my 50s, and I finished my bachelor's degree after not having been in college in 30 years. And once I finished, I got a degree in history. And then my family was like, well, keep going. So I said, all right, I'll keep going. And I did a master's degree in something called liberal studies. And I will tell your audience that when you're going back to college in your 50s, you study what you want. It's for you, right? And so I thought, well, I really want to tease out women's boxing. Where does it live in the world? Here is the sport that everybody loves to hate, right? Especially in the 90s when women were first really contesting the sport. There was a lot of negativity towards women in the ring. And I wanted to understand, why was that the case? So I did my master's thesis with a title that said Boundaries in Motion. And what I looked at is what defines being a man and what defines being a woman in our culture. And why is it that it's okay for men to box, but it isn't okay for women to box? But they can do MMA, or they can do kickboxing, they can do karate, they just can't do boxing. So I teased that out in my thesis, and really looked at it from the perspective of culture and from the association that boxing has with hypermasculinity, and with manliness. It's called the manly art, right? So I really try to understand that, to understand why fans had such difficulty watching women in the ring in a boxing gym, but in a boxing context, but it was okay in MMA. So I teased that out in my thesis, and then from there, since I had done so much research, I was approached by a publisher to actually write a history of the sport. And I was so thrilled and excited to do that, because as I was researching, there was no history. I had to look at sources of just general histories in boxing and try to find the name of one woman, and did a lot of research in newspapers and so on, and interviewed people about it. So I then spent the next 2 years doing research and writing the book itself. And I take the story of women in the sport from the early 1700s in England, when those of you who know anything about boxing history, that's kind of when we date official start of our understanding of modern boxing. A man named James Figg kind of came up with the concept of a ring, and they would, at first, they fought with a short sword in one hand and a fist in the other, and they would hold on to a crown, like a British pound, in their hand. And whoever dropped it first lost, unless they were severely injured. So basically, if you were really hurt, you were going to drop the coin and you lost. And even though we've always thought of this as when men started boxing, well, women boxed then too in the 1720s. Kind of hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. And we know this because of all the advertisements in newspapers that were published at the time, that where women would call each other out, kind of the way people do now. Same kind of marketing. Men would call each other out, I, the great, brilliant boxer of the world, am going to defeat you. And you had the same thing for women. So it was kind of an extraordinary experience. And I then followed the story of women's boxing all the way through to 2012, when we had the first Olympic Games in London, where women were actually allowed to box. So it's a really very fascinating story, where there are ebbs and flows, periods of time in history when it was acceptable for women to contest the sport, and periods in history where it was not, such as 1880s and 1890s in America. It was rather popular sport.
And
I tell this. Mm-hmm.
In the book, you mentioned about the 2012 Olympics,
Yes.
where so people know now is the time. Clarissa Shields, she was one of the first one in the USA team to go and participate. It was only 3 categories in there to participate, right? And it
That is
was
correct.
three of them: Clarissa Shields, Marlena Esparza, right?
Yes.
And
And Queen Underwood was the third. And Marlena Esparza, who's from Texas, she won a bronze medal in the flyweight. And Clarissa Shields won a gold medal in middleweight, the first American woman to win gold. And then in 2016, she repeated her gold medal win, becoming the first American boxer, period, male or female, to have back-to-back gold medals in the Olympics. So it was quite an extraordinary achievement. Marlena Esparza did not contest in 2016. She actually began her professional career right around that time. Clarissa then became a professional after the 2016 Olympics. And in fact, you will see that many of the women who are now becoming stars in women's boxing have a very deep amateur background as national and international champions, and with an Olympic pedigree.
So, and still till this day, even with that background, I got my Micaela Mayer. She was here in the program also, and she was telling me that it's kind of getting better because of the Olympics and because of the background, and it's getting better for business and to get paid into boxing. But still, it's not making justice. It's not equality, because as you can see, 2 cases, Clarissa Shields and Amanda Serrano, that we talk about both of them a little bit. They went to MMA looking for the pay. They went to the mixed
Absolutely
martial arts,
right.
because they haven't, even though all these great things Clarissa has done for in the amateur part and also in the professional part, there is no justice for the money.
No, there isn't. And there's much more respect given to them as fighters on the MMA side. There's a female champion named Holly Holm who actually did very well, because she's from the state of New Mexico, which has a very unique, very tight boxing community that supports its own. And she was a superb fighter. She came from a martial arts background, kickboxing background, came into boxing, had a tremendous career. But even she was up against the limitations at her prime, where she wasn't being able to get any television coverage except in the local markets. Or maybe she would be carried on a Spanish language channel that would play in Mexico or on cable, but basically was only in her local market. She couldn't break. They weren't going to put her on Showtime or HBO or ESPN. None of that was available to her. So she just said, enough, I want to get paid. And she also crossed over into MMA. She eventually fought Ronda Rousey. She's had, an up and down career, but she's an absolute stellar star in MMA. and in fact was on the team that helped train Claressa Shields as she began to transition into her second sport as an MMA artist. And she won her first bout in a very exciting fashion. She was down 2 rounds, but just dug deep and said nope and won by KO. So it's quite an exciting bout. Amanda Serrano, the same thing. She has crossed over into mixed martial arts and has found more respect, better paydays, and has also been leveraging that in a very smart way through her promoter, DeBella Entertainment, to really start to get her into bigger and better platforms. And in fact, Amanda was one of the first women to be back on television. Her fight, I think it was in 2015, was shown on CBS Sports. It had been the first fight CBS Sports carried of women boxers in about 15 years. Because in the 90s and the early aughts, there was a lot of coverage of female boxing and on a regular basis. They were often on the undercards for pay-per-view, and they were also on regular, like Friday Night Fights on ESPN. They were regularly on Showtime. HBO was always another story. They never wanted to show women, but they did eventually show women. And in fact, the Amanda Serrano's fight with Heather Hardy was shown on HBO. It was actually the last broadcast. Yeah. So one of the last broadcasts. But so you are correct. There's still a lot of, it doesn't matter how great a fighter you are, you still have to fight.
But at the end, when we hear you saying the whole story, we saw that boxing maybe didn't do justice to Holly Holmes, right? When she crossed over from martial arts to boxing, right? But life took care of itself when she went back to mixed martial arts and defeat Ronda Rousey, and then she did justice for herself, like showing, look, I can do it, and that was a great victory, and that was a great thing for her. And even though this, life continue, mixed martial arts is different. Even women's boxing is different because not every woman gonna be like Lucia Richter and like Clarissa Shields and be undefeated,
right, exactly.
like Kathy Taylor and be undefeated, but they still can be champions and they still fighting in there and working it. So life took care of itself. And now that you mentioned Lou DiBella, I think Lou DiBella is one of these promoters that he is being really supporting woman boxing these days. Recently, like last Friday, he did a card which the main event was women. It was problems because of the COVID and people and boxers get hurt, but it was a female's top card.
Yeah, the main event was Callie Reese, who's a Native American, the first Native American women's boxing champion. She fought Diana Prozac. They fought at super lightweight or junior welterweight, whichever one you want to call it. And that was a fantastic bout. It was shown on UFC Fight TV. A really great card. But Lou DiBella in particular has been a real champion of women's boxing for years. I mean, he started off with fighters like Sonia Lamonicas, who's a heavyweight fighter. She was originally from Massachusetts and then started fighting out of Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn. We call her the Scholar because she's also a school teacher. His second fighter was Heather Hardy, who's a really wonderful, remarkable fighter out of Brooklyn, who eventually went on to fight Amanda Serrano, lost, but boy, did she would not go down. So that was one of those great bouts. And then he has been really expanding that, eventually getting Amanda Serrano, Shelley Vincent, Raquel Miller, Tiara Brown. So he has really is pushing the envelope of bringing more and more women onto his roster. And he has a series called Broadway Boxing that he started, maybe 15 years ago. And started, which is covered always on the local markets. So it's a place for him to bring his fighters up, starting their first bouts, the first 3, 4, 5 bouts before he starts to push them out onto the bigger cards. And he has done that for men and women. and then works to get them on the PBC cards, Showtime cards, top rank cards, whatever cards he can get, he looks to push. But now he's also expanding that to really promote his own total fights, and really with an emphasis on female fighters. So this was his second card with attempting to do an all-female card. But as you say, because of COVID and injuries, there were supposed to be 4 fights, and it had to be pulled back to 2. But the intention is there. And
the intention was to have 4, yeah.
The intention was to have 4, and he is committed to that and will continue that commitment, and is now really working hard to represent Amanda Serrano to get her to the next level, to get her to the superstar level, the Pacquiao level for female boxing. And that is his intent, and he's thoroughly committed to that objective.
He's in the right track, but the other promoters are like always. It's like back in the days when Christy Martin and then Bob Arum and now Eddie Hearn and all these people, they seen it as business instead of as a sport, and that can bring you big business. They seeing it somewhere different, and it's not looking good. But DiBella is doing his part, and he's now trying to get a network also. DiBella also he's partnering with the UFC Fight Pass, and he's trying to also make ESPN listening, like, hey, let me use part of your budget so we can bring you this part, and the females and all that. So it's been interesting.
It is. I mean, Top Rank has an ESPN deal, and they've had Michaela Mayer, and they've brought her along very beautifully. But he needs to expand that. He's got her now, maybe a second fighter, but they need to expand the number of fighters that they have, because the fighters are there. The depth is there. There is remarkable talent among women. It's just a matter of giving them the opportunity and the place to train and a reasonable enough life so they can afford it. I mean, Jessica McCaskill still has a full-time job. She's a unified champion, but she still needs to work full-time.
And they still looking for work. And then Eddie Hearn is taking their time, and they want to see Kathy. They want to see Kathy Taylor, but Eddie Hearn keep. So, and now that the situation when I was talking to Michaela Mayer here in the program, she was about her last fight with the Argentinian Farias, right? We was talking about it, and they said, well, we still got to see if Eddie Hearn want to do business, because he signed the other 3 champions on my weight. So, and now the World Boxing Series want to do a tournament in that category. And but Eddie Hearn still working with his fighters, and it's not letting the world see the best fighters against the best. Hopefully, also another thing that she mentioned was Cristina Cruz, that Puerto Rican that represented the U.S. team also, and a national champion in a couple of times. Good friend with Michaela Myers. She just recently did her professional debut. So hopefully Myers can say Top Rank, hey, let's see if we can bring Cristina Cruz.
She's brilliant. She is an absolute brilliant fighter. Although, I think we were talking about this a little bit in the background. She is so used to fighting 3-minute rounds. It was a little difficult for her to figure out how to fight at 2 minutes again. But she's terrific. She's also, in New York City, she has the record for the most Golden Gloves wins for any women fighter. I mean, she's just the coolest. She's really a sensational fighter. So I'm really excited that she's finally crossed over into the ranks of professional side. But there are a lot of women. And the thing is, these younger fighters, they've started fighting at 9, 10, 11 years old. And there's organizations like, Beautiful Brawlers out in California, in Northern California, Pacifico, who have these programs where they're bringing up these little girls and they are training them. And these girls are winning the JOs, and they're going on, in their different age categories. And then they're going on to contest at nationals and winning at nationals. So there's a lot of these small organizations that are supporting women in their communities, as alongside their alongside the boys, and you can't tell the difference in skill. It's the same skill, because they're really teaching them young. And so these women who are coming up, even Marlon Esparza, she started boxing at 11. Clarissa Shields started boxing at 11. And it shows in the pedigree and in their career and how they've been able to capitalize on that early training to become such powerhouses in their professional careers.
We also seen lately, since because of the social media, a lot of Instagram videos and a lot of these other things, a lot of women's trainers and
Yep.
boxing trainers, training men's, and also a lot of women's in the corners and
Yep.
in the ring as a referees, and
Yep.
also a lot of women's in the part of the broadcast, in the part of the communication in this podcast.
Yep.
Women's like you also. We've seen a lot of changes. Like the other day, I was watching the fights, and the woman's was the one leading the broadcast. You know,
Yeah, it was Michaela Mayer was part of that. I mean,
Marlene Esparza been there too.
yeah, Marlene Esparza,
Denise Estrada
yeah,
in the
and you
Golden
have
Boy
Alicia
strike. Yeah.
Napoleon, who's a super middleweight champion who does a lot of local, sort of more local television. You've ESPN has women. Matchroom Boxing has at least one woman always
Mhm.
somewhere in their mix, and that's great. Sort of the one lagging behind more than anything is probably PBC, but they will or won't catch up, and they're less of a powerhouse than they were when they first started a few years ago. You were talking about Eddie Hearn, and he also, as you said rightfully, he's developing this stable of female fighters. In the way that Lou DiBella has, kind of taking a page out of that. What he's doing though is looking kind of more to the top, trying to get as many champions as he can, whether it's European champions or former Olympians. But he plays hardball in terms of what he's willing to pay opponents. And part of the problem this summer at Fight Camp was it was very hard to attract competition for Savannah Marshall and Natasha Jonas, who are two. Savannah Marshall is a champion in middleweight. Natasha Jonas is an Olympian who really she's had a couple of very close calls, but they could not get opponents for them, in part because of money, in part because of COVID. But money is an issue. You've got to be willing to pay people, and if you're going to lowball them.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with you mentioned it early, Cali Reese. She just fought this week, this
Yes.
past week, Friday in the DiBella fight. She was the main event. She have a tough fight in there also, but she pulled it
Yep.
through. She got it, still champion. But at the same time, we can see her. She's active in the social media, and she's also active in the communities,
Yes,
giving
she is.
awareness in other topics. And in her story is great. It's great for the Mother's Day. She not also go for women's boxing itself, but also for a lot of women's rights and her ancestors and all that stuff, right? And she's a good piece of awareness, of community awareness, and also in social media they kind of very big. Her and her trainer and husband and
Yeah, Brian Cohen, and
Brian
he's
Cohen.
another man. He's a manager that manages a lot of different women,
Mhm.
including Ebony Bridges, who just fought who's Australian, who just fought in London and won on a Matchroom Boxing card. The thing with Callie Reese is she also was the star and writer, one of the writers for a film called Catch the Fair One, which is about human trafficking among Native American women, which has been a really terrible, underreported problem in the United States. And she plays a sister of an older sister whose younger sister disappears and is presumed to have been kidnapped and trafficked. And the film follows her. Callie Reese plays this character we follow her journey to find her sister. It's a very powerful movie. It was won Best Audience at Tribeca Film Festival, which is a very large, very exclusive film festival in New York City. And the film has just been picked up for distribution. So as you say, not only is she fighting as a women's boxer, but she is very keenly aware of using her position for social issues and social justice. And you have a fighter like Heather Hardy, who also does that out of New York City. She has really been a strong proponent for pay equity, and also has the topics of domestic abuse and recovery from rape, because this is something that happened to her in her young life. There's also a Haitian fighter, a Haitian American fighter named Malissa Smith, who uses her platform to support the cause of autism. So these are fighters that, a lot of women fighters, they're there to fight, but they're also aware that they're part of a larger stream of consciousness, and that just by being in their roles as fighters, they're making a statement about who and what women can be. And then they add onto that the fact that there's an opportunity for activism that's important, because it's more than just boxing. You're there also for your larger community, whatever community it is that you're representing.
Also, a good example of all of them is Christy Martin. Christy
Yes.
Martin, which it was the one that solidified women's boxing, that really give the credibility to women's boxing back in 1996. That if we know boxing, either women's or males, we know the story. With Christy Martin, so Christy Martin did it, and now these days, Christy Martin using her story to create awareness of her situation, which a woman's abuse and all that, and also we just saw it in Netflix recently, the
Yes.
Untold Story, which is being big now. But I recommend people to watch it, to see it,
Absolutely.
to understand the history, where she coming from. I have it here in our program, and she told us the whole story. And then I read your book. I said this is what she was talking about. Yeah, and with the Layla Ali situation, the differing weights and all that stuff. Hey, but people, we got to keep growing this. People, all these fighters, they got to understand that today is not all about the promoters. Also, they got to market themselves honestly and big in the social media, which is free. It's really free
Absolutely.
for them to create all that awareness in their areas and then go to the biggest stages. Now, going back to that Ludibella core, which is
Hmm.
it led us to to like what we're moving now, which is boxing these days. A in that card, it was also like a match with the Ibarra, which she was looking to be qualified to fight Jessica
Jessica
McCaskill.
McCaskill. Yeah, that's
Yep.
right. Ibarra has her own story. A
Hmm.
harrowing story.
Yep.
She was intending on trying out to be on the Mexican Olympic team and was
Hmm.
kidnapped, and feared for her life. She has young children and managed to escape, but just absolutely harrowing. And there she was in the ring 4 months later.
Yeah.
So extraordinary story.
We saw her in Puerto Rico because she went and gave a surprise over there with the Ring City, USA,
Hmm.
which also got Amanda Serrano against the Argentinian. I forgot her name right on the top of my head, but it was the
Acuna,
no again, no,
that
not
fight.
Acuna.
Okay.
She fought a. I come with the name, but she fought in Puerto Rico with the Ring City, USA, and also Ibarra got the opportunity, and she gave a big surprise over there in Puerto Rico, which earned this opportunity, and now she's gone in
Right.
Jessica McCaskill, but then McCaskill just wanted the big fights. She's looking
Yeah.
at Kathy Taylor and other things, and so it's also a problem in there. But these promoters, and these also managers, like Brian Cohen that we mentioned it, and also the Mexican promoter Hector, I forgot his name. Fernandez is the one
Hmm.
that managed Ibarra. Good people too. He's been here in our program too, and he went to Puerto Rico knowing that hey, we may not have a chance, but we're gonna make it happen, and they make it happen. They give the surprise. Same thing this weekend. She looked like you said. She have all this trouble, which it can be
Oh,
taken. This her story can be taken to the community. So this
absolutely.
girl so people understand how bad these girls want it, how much they want to fight for it.
How
And
much and how much they need to. She needs it.
mhm,
She needs it to support her family. I mean,
mhm,
that's the thing that people have to understand. These are not rich women that are just doing this because it's fun. They need to earn a living. You know, they're single mothers, or they're married, but they have obligations. They have things they have to do and
mhm.
take care
And they
of.
got a job also. They got a job. Yeah.
They're working. They're working. You know, if they're lucky, they're working full time in a gym as a trainer, at least, so they're around boxing. Someone like Heather Hardy, that's what she does. She's a trainer. But let me tell you, I have watched her before her fight with Amanda Serrano. That was the biggest fight of her career. She was the champion for
Mhm.
WBA. She was working full time in the gym, and her camp was the 3 extra hours she stayed to work out and do her stuff every day and spar at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning before her day started. So
And she
that
and she
that's the
and she have a
reality.
great fight. She have a great fight with Serrano. Like
She did
it
have a
was a
great fight.
great fight in
It,
HBO. That
that
it
was an
was great.
amazing fight.
Hmm.
Nobody believed she would survive, and she was like, "Man, I am not going down. Not happening."
So now we understand how bad it is, and now we're seeing some of this background and some of what happened really in the backstage of the whole story, and we understand how big these women are. Because going
Yeah.
in the ring with Amanda Serrano, which we're gonna talk about her later on, which is she's a killer. She's about to be a either right there with Christy Martin or and Lucia Richter, or even with them or above them at the end of the career. We'll see, but
Yep.
the thing about it is, these women go hard. In your book is a part that said that it was a study about women can absorb more pain than men, and also they got strong legs, also stronger legs and all that. So, and people really don't seeing that. They don't seeing that women deserve more. We talk about some early. You mentioned it about the 2 minutes rounds and the 3 minutes round, right? In the Olympics, we
Mhm.
all know 3 minutes, 3 rounds. And now, what has been happening? How you see it in terms of business and in terms of competition with the 2 minutes rounds in the professionals. Sometimes we seen these women, oh, they can give us a great fight, and when the action start and they gotta go at it, right, it's over, and then we gotta go to the corner and come back and start it all over again. How you see it, Melissa?
Well, it's complicated. I mean, first of all, when women's boxing first started, sort of as a legal sport in the United States in the 1970s, and I'm bringing it back because I want you to understand where this
Mhm.
comes from. The states, many of the states, were very reluctant to allow boxing for women at all, but they were being sued in the 1970s based on federal civil rights laws of equality for men and women on employment. And since boxing is a professional sport, they were losing in court because you're there to earn a living. And women were going to court saying, hey, you're denying me the right to earn a living as a boxer. So women were winning. And then the boxing commissions were running around and scrambling. I mean, these were the days when there were doctors claiming that if a woman got hit in the breast, she would get breast cancer. I mean, it was pretty cray cray. So, you know, so the boxing organizations were going, oh, okay, the commissions, well, we'll only allow it if they box for a minute or they only box for 2 minutes. So you had this crazy quilt of rules that were being enacted. Some places were saying, yep, you can only fight 2 minutes, you can only have 4 rounds, you can only have 6 rounds, you got to wear like an aluminum bra. I mean, it's really nutty. Other states were more flexible because there were women who fought in the 70s and early 80s who were fighting 3 minute rounds, 12 rounds for, the same as the guys. So it was kind of a patch quilt. But as the sanctioning bodies got involved in women's boxing, they started to adhere to the 2 minute rounds. And especially the larger boxing organizations like WBC, WBA, the main ones were really starting to solidify the 2 minute rounds. So even though a fighter like Layla McCarter, who's an extraordinary boxer, has had a 20-year professional career, had convinced the boxing organization in Las Vegas to allow her 3-minute rounds, 12-round championship bouts. She couldn't do it if it were certain sanctioning organizations because they refused to sanction the bouts. So that happened. And then you also had television saying, okay, no, we don't want this. Women should only fight for 2 minutes. It's not a real sport. So you had that pressure. And then you had the issue of pay and pay equity. And women were being paid nothing, like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 for a fight. As late as, 2010, 11, I think Alicia Ashley was the first main event in Brooklyn. She got paid $3,000 for a bout. I mean, just nuts. So it kind of solidified that it was 2-minute rounds with a few exceptions. Stopped at 10 rounds for a championship bout. If it was not a championship bout, it was going to be 8 rounds max. Most of the beginner fights were 4 rounds or 6, typically 4 or 6. 8 rounds for just like the other night when Ibarra fought, it was 8 rounds as a prelim to getting ready for a title bout, and then the 10 rounds for championship bouts. And it kind of went along that way without too much of an issue. But as women's boxing has started to peak again in the last 5, really since starting with the Olympics in 2012, but really pushing in 2016 after those Olympics, there's been a lot of pressure to say, what the hell is this 2-minute rounds? Women are great. They come out there, they fight end to end for 120 seconds, whatever it is. They just never stop. And then they go and they pant really deep at the corner, get cleaned up and go again. But there's really no time to lay out the longer strategies. And even though women practice at 3 minutes, they spar at 3 minutes, they do everything at 3 minutes. In the ring, they're at 2. And so, yes, it does change the nature of the game. On the one hand, it makes it very exciting because you got to work like heck to get any kind of scoring, to get any kind of recognition or fan recognition of what you're trying to do in the ring. But it also doesn't allow for a fight to develop more organically. And it is negatively compared to men, as if the women's bouts somehow aren't enough. And that in itself is really a shame and disrespectful of all the work that the women do. They're not the ones saying, I will only fight 2 minutes. They would love the opportunity to fight 3. But they need to be paid. They need to have promoters who are willing to support them at a 3-minute round. Because if you're fighting 10 2-minute rounds, you're fighting for 20 minutes and contesting it at a high level in a championship bout, and then you're going to do another 10 minutes of fighting and not get paid anymore. And we were like, no,
it's not.
That doesn't work for me. I'm putting my life on the line when I walk in the ring. And if you don't believe that women can't get hurt, just look at what their faces look like. Look at what an Amanda Serrano opponent looks like if it goes the distance. Her face is marred, So make that a 30-minute fight, if someone hangs in there that long. Or even look at Amanda herself. She's out there. It's not like she doesn't get touched. You always get touched. Anytime you're touched, it has an effect on your body. And so there needs to be that equity. And so that's the tension, is not only sanctioning bodies that are not willing to sanction more than 2 minutes, but fighters who are saying, okay, fine, I'll go for it, but show me the money. Because as it is, I'm putting my life on the line for nothing. So I'm not going to add to that. Don't take even more advantage of me. When you're paying a guy with a worse record than me 3 times what I'm being paid to walk into the ring. I'm a champion, and he's, in his 3rd fight, and he's earning triple my salary. Not happening.
Malissa, let's talk real quick about a detail that I don't want to let go, because when I talked to Christy Martin about it, We talked backstage about it, and we talked during the interview. The part of the I'm sorry, the part of the weight difference at the beginning of women's boxing, it was kind of the MMA at the beginning, that it was no it can be a big man
Yeah,
with a
yeah, yeah.
small man in there, and then they regulate it. In women's boxing, it happens the same. Even Christy Martin told me a story about, she fought a woman big, like almost 200 pounds, that they brought her, and she was cut and everything, but she didn't got that much skill, so she can get it out of the way. But it was a big difference in a weight, and then also we went through the story, and she talked to me about the Layla Ali fight. She didn't realize how big Layla was, and how a much of the weight difference, until she signed the contract. And then she said, "Well, I'm going to hit her so hard, which I probably can get her." Then she gave all the credit to Layla, because Layla went to the gym and earned it. So it talked to me about that difference in weight real quick, and in the book, that you bring it up, in something.
Sure. So basically, Layla Ali was what, 5'10", 5'9", 5'10", big, big woman and solid. And, they were fighting at middleweight, like 165 pounds, I think. And Christy typically fought at welterweight, lightweight. I mean, she started her career at lightweight, went up a little bit in weight. But in order to get to meet weight, contract weight, she wore a full army uniform, had weights in her pockets, big heavy shoes to make weight, because she was at least 10, 15 pounds less than she should have been. And she had to fake it. Usually women are like down in their string bikini on a scale, and
Mm-hmm.
they're sweating it out, just like the guys when they're trying to make weight. But she went the absolute other direction. And, Layla hit hard. She was a real boxer. Yes, she was a famous boxing daughter. But, Layla Ali even credits Christy Martin with her burgeoning understanding. Oh my God, you mean it's that eureka moment, just like when I felt like, me walking into Lisa's gym, wow, I can do that. Layla Ali had that eureka moment when she saw Christy Martin fight on the Tyson card. She's like, wow, I can do that. And then she got her hiney into the gym, and she started to do that. And she got real trainers, and she really worked hard. And listen, she had name, she had a brand before she ever walked in the door. And to this day, she's really probably still has the most name recognition as a female boxer. If you mention women's boxing, most people won't know a thing. And then they'll say, Layla Ali, right?
Ali,
Because
yeah.
she was able to cross over in a way that Christy didn't. Christy was more in the boxing world. Layla could go into both worlds. And
If it
by the
was social
time,
media, yeah.
yeah, and by the time they fought, Christy was sort of on the back end of her career. So it
Mhm.
was sort of like, oh, let's make the fight of the century. But really, the fight of the century was Christy Martin and Lucia Riker, when they
Which
were
never
both
happened.
in their prime, which never happened for a
Mhm.
variety of reasons. But they were at the better weight for each other. And that would have been a monster of a fight, because Lucia Riker was an extraordinary boxer. And I really recommend anyone who's listening to seek out YouTube videos of Lucia Riker boxing, because she was extraordinarily skilled and was trained by Freddie Roach. He took one look at her and said, "Yep, I'm with you." It was the first woman he ever trained. So, so Christy, yeah, she really she did what she could to stay alive in that fight, because she's a person that won't give up. I think what you had mentioned earlier, her documentary, which just came out, it's on Netflix, and she does tell that story, and it's really, if you can watch that untold story, because she does describe in detail what that was like and what it was like to be in the ring, but also hearkening to our earlier conversation, she is there as an advocate for women who've been the victims of domestic violence. And in her case, her husband tried to murder her and is now in prison for attempted murder. Left her for dead after shooting and stabbing her. So extraordinary story of courage. And she is a
Mhm.
woman that always had courage in the ring.
You imagine just for a second, if it was these days with social media, how big those three been? Lucia Riker, Christy Martin, and Leila
Yeah,
Ali. Not only that, you mentioned in your book one thing that we know: other daughters of big boxers came up through, which is Larry Holmes' daughter came up also. And what are
yeah,
the other
and
ones?
Jackie Frazier.
Rachel. Uh-huh.
So Frazier's daughter, and they actually they sorry, Layla Ali put together with Jackie Frazier a pay-per-view fight on the
Mhm.
Hall of Fame weekend up near Canastota, New York. They put together what they called Ali Frazier 4, which was the
Mhm.
two of them fighting each other. And it really was a good bout. Again, you can probably find it on YouTube, and I highly recommend that you watch it because, it's not the most elegant of fighting. I'll be quite frank about that, especially Jackie Frazier. But man, the heart was there. And
The
that's, part of what women were fighting. So there were women who um, really had skills, someone like Christy, someone like Lucia Riker. And then there were women who were less skilled but had heart. So, you know, because Christy did so well in 1996 and became this flash and was had this bout with an Irish fighter named Deirdre Gogarty. It was 6 rounds. They were both covered in blood. I mean, it was an extraordinary fight, the fight of the night on this Mike Tyson card, which was otherwise a snooze. She became an overnight sensation, got on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, dollar signs. Let's start putting women on the fights. Well, there were not as many women as there are now. There was no amateur sports because amateur boxing was only just legalized in around 1996. So there was no stable. So there were women who had always wanted to fight and just kind of came from martial arts backgrounds, kickboxing backgrounds, and then kind of learned the sport as professionals. And they were being grabbed up by anybody who could find them because of the popularity and the novelty of it. And so you had Don King was promoting Christy Martin.
Christy Martin.
Yeah,
And
and Bob
I think it
Arum.
was Lucia Riker, right?
Yeah, and Lucia Riker was being promoted by Bob Arum, and then he eventually dropped her and picked up Mia St. John. So if
Hmm.
Christy Martin was in pink, Mia St. John was in hot pink,
Hmm.
and she was on the cover of Playboy with two
Playboy,
big
yeah.
red boxing gloves in front of her boobs. I mean, it was really getting kind of crazy time. And then you had all the daughters and Archie Moore's daughter, Roberta Duran's, all the daughters were fighting.
Roberto Duran's daughter too. It's a whole
Yeah,
chapter in here about it. It's a whole
yeah,
chapter in the book about it. I read it. It's
yeah.
265 pages, and it's a whole chapter. Not only daughters, also sisters of boxers, and
Daughters,
the whole
sisters, you
thing.
name it.
And how like I tell you, if it was social media on those days, like you said, these days, some of these young ones, they're using social media, Instagram, a platform, Facebook, to show what a Mia San John already did with the Playboy situation, and that you
Exactly.
give the details in your book, because Christy Martin came in Sports Illustrated organically. Like Sports
Yes.
Illustrated didn't have no choice but to put it in because of that not great 1996 fight that Don Kim
Yep.
put together and give her the chance. Then here come Bob Aaron looking for a business. It's like right now what's happening with Eddie Hearn. If we bring
Yep.
it to the modern era, it's comparable. But now, a this question: those three, Ali, Christy Martin, and Lucia Richter. I know you have that bread, a that big breeding. A how you rating? How you like where you put them?
You mean the pound for pound list?
The pound
That's
for
tough.
pound list of those three. Where you put them? Because I know in your book you said that a Lucia Riker, which I think it is undoubtedly the top one. But how you put
Yeah,
it these days?
I I I think from a technical boxer, perspective, pure boxing, for me, it's Riker, Martin, Ali. From the perspective of career, it's Martin, Riker, Ali.
Hmm. Because
Um,
Riker left early and she retired
Riker
on.
left earlier.
Hmm.
Ali was later. Had different quality fighters. For instance, the other big middleweight at that time was Ann Wolfe, who went on to become a fantastic boxing trainer. Um, and that was the fight Layla never had, and that was the fight that was supposed to happen at middleweight. If Christy Martin was supposed to fight Lucia Riker, Layla Ali should have fought Ann Wolfe. It's sort of like what we think of now when we say Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall. They should
Hmm.
have a fight.
Yeah.
Is Layla Ali and Ann Wolfe were supposed to? That was the match. That was the dream match, because they were at the same weight class. And Ann Wolfe, she just she just was a power. There's a video you can see. There was a very tall female boxer named Vonda Ward. She was originally a basketball player, tremendous athlete, over 6 feet tall, became a boxer, did quite well. Probably the most famous knockout of all time is Ann Wolfe feigning with a left and then clocking Vonda Ward with a straight right to the jaw, and she went down like a tree.
Mhm.
And that was Ann Wolfe. So that was the fight of that era. And look, it's boxing, so promoters are trying to make money, and as Christy says herself, it was at the later end, and she just didn't understand how big
it,
Layla
it, it was
was.
it was gonna be a $1 million purse
Yeah,
on Matt Martin and Richter that never happened, and I believe that Bob Arum did good to Lucia Riker, and but we all product of a second opportunities, and I also believe that Bob got a second chance here with Michaela Meyer,
I
and
agree. Yeah,
I hope he do right this time with her, and bring more like people been asking, and
yeah,
they've been earning it because as you can see, life always helped the case, and
yeah,
Michaela Meyers even went to a start a show in ESPN because of the COVID, So
yeah,
life
absolutely.
work itself. Life is always looking, and hopefully Bob is in the end of his career, but hopefully he understand this time that life give him a second chance with Mick Calamayer, and then hopefully Eddie Hearn stop playing because that's what really doing. He's playing business instead of making business. That's my
Yeah,
belief. That's my personal opinion. But at the same time, you was telling me that we see these brackets now. So it's like these days, everybody want to see the great Amanda Serrano and Kathy Taylor. And like I said, Eddie Hearn still playing around, playing a business instead of making business. Ludi Bella is trying. We almost got the fight. Kobe came in, Moni, this thing, and now we'll see if it happens. Amanda going. This is the last topic. Amanda going this weekend to
yes,
her
she
big
is.
to her
She is.
big stage.
She is
Talk
going
to
at her
me.
biggest
Talk to me
stage.
about it. Hmm.
So, Jake Paul, who is the Instagram, speaking of social media,
Social
an
media.
Instagram sensation, he and his brother Josh have embraced boxing. And Jake Paul has a fight pay-per-view fight card on Showtime on August 29th. And part of his deal when he was putting together the card was to say, I want a women's boxing fight on this card. And he spoke to Steven Espinoza, who's the head of Showtime,
Showtime. Uh-huh.
and Showtime Boxing. And Espinoza was crucial in bringing Clarissa Shields to Boxing After Dark, which was a huge deal because she, became main event on Showtime shows, which was the first time a woman ever did that. So he's been committed to having women on his cards when he can. So he said, I think I know who to go to. So, he had outreach to Ludabella, and they were like, Amanda Serrano. She's it. She's the goods. And she, right now, she will be fighting Yamila Mercado.
Yeah, Milet Mercado. Yeah.
and who's a very good boxer herself. She's 18-2. She's a world champion herself. And they will be fighting for 3 featherweight belts, the WBC, WBO, and IBO.
IPO. Hmm.
And this is going to be war, because that's how Amanda Serrano fights.
I
And
have a I have Jamile here in the program with us. When a couple of fights before, the last one she have against the undefeated fighter that give her a hard time over there in Mexico also. And Jamilet is going to be a good test for it, even if people believe that she's coming up weight. Is a big difference in women's boxing weight. Amanda is going to have a hard time because of the changes in weight and the bigger she's getting and the age and all that. For her to make 126, it might sound like she make it easier, but no, she have a hard time. But Jamilet, she's growing, she's younger. And the one thing that people don't understand is that she changed camps. She went to camp with Jackie Nava, which Jackie Nava in the history of boxing tells us that
yeah,
she is one of the best strategic a person in boxing. She have been in
absolutely.
war at the featherweight. She's been into a big wars with the Argentinians, with anybody, and she always put up a great strategy. And she's building the strategy for this fight for the young Jamilet Mercado. So this is gonna be two things: either Jamilet create the upset,
Yeah.
or Serrano be a show that she is the greatest out there, right? Now, with that say, I want to ask you this: how great for you right now at this stage is Amanda Serrano?
I think she's got the real goods. She's an incredibly technical fighter. When you watch her spar, just shadow box, she's perfect. She's got her earmuffs. She's fluid. She flows in this beautiful, clean rhythm. And she is as strong as they come because of that beautiful technical skill. She wastes nothing. She's very economical in how she fights. And so she's able to spring her very strong body just with the slightest twitching movements when she's turning a hook. She will put someone down on the ground. I mean, this is a woman with 30 knockouts fighting 2-minute rounds. So that gives you a sense of what her power is. And any woman who fights her says, wow, I have never been hit that hard. That was certainly what Heather Howdy had to say when she fought her. So I think that she has a really good strategic mind in the ring. She's a defensive and offensive fighter, and she's very quick on her feet. And she's able to really cover the ring very, very quickly. She uses nice lateral movement, which is, I think, going to be very critical to how she's able to outbox her opponent.
Now, we saw this weekend the great Manny Pacquiao in the
Mm-hmm.
men's side, right? We
Yep.
saw Manny Pacquiao probably having his last fight. We saw age
Yep.
came to him and the whole thing, but
Yep.
people still seeing him as the one of the greatest in history, right?
Yeah.
What's your opinion about Amanda Serrano will be in your mind and your knowledge about women's history? Where you think Amanda Serrano is going to end? Where Amanda Serrano is going to end in history? Do you think
Well,
she can end on the top?
yes, I think that she has every opportunity to be. I think right now she's in the top three ranking, top three, top four. I can't remember just exactly where we have her these days. She is, look, she's got 7 belts in 7 weight classes. And she is very fluid in how her weights. Now, some of that is dictated by the fact that as distinct from a male career where, you can start out at featherweight and then go up to, junior lightweight very slowly, very strategically. For women, it's very fluid. You may be fighting at 140, and then you got to fight at 126, and then you're fighting at 132, because those are the only places where the fights are. So women are used to that. And for Amanda, she has a regimen of training and a regimen of diet that lets her stay on point in a very clear way. So for her, she really doesn't have that much of an issue making weight, because she stays where she needs to be. She's not a fighter that's going to gain 30 pounds in between bouts. She's going to stay where she needs to be. And featherweight is her favorite weight. That's her natural weight. So she's very comfortable to fight there. I think that Amanda Serrano certainly ends up in the Boxing Hall of Fame. And just for your audience to know, starting in 2020, the International Boxing Hall of Fame started to induct women. Christy Martin was in the first class, along with Lucia Riker. And she will certainly be a Hall of Fame fighter. But more than that, I think that she still has room to grow her career. And I know that she's really wants to be an undisputed fighter. Her goal is to be an undisputed featherweight titleist if she can. It's been a little bit of a challenge finding, getting the fights made with people at that belt. And if possible, have an undisputed bout with Katie Taylor, where she's an undisputed at her weight, Katie Taylor is an undisputed at lightweight, and then they battle each other, hopefully in Madison Square Garden. And if I have anything to say on it, it's got to be the main event, because that is a main event fight. Period.
That's a main event fight.
It's a main event fight, and it's got to be, in Madison Square Garden, main event for all the money. Make that the real $1 million baby fight.
The real $1 million baby fight, yes.
Because no one else in America has done that. The only fighter that's fought for $1 million is Regina Hamlick in Germany years ago. So
we was talking about she got two things in mind. She want to be the undisputed 126 pounds champion, which is what we was talking early. Some of the women's want equality and want to show that they are the best, but at the same time, it also become trouble. Like Erika Dinamita Cruz, which is the belt that Amanda's missing, they offer her $100,000 to fight in this card against Amanda, and she refused. She refused. She said the terms wasn't right. And she refused $100,000 because she said that she want to enjoy the belt and do another another fight before Amanda and be in better terms because of the time they was giving her to fight, the visa of her parents, a lot of stuff. But that's when we see also problems, but that's one. And then the other one.
Boxing, right?
That's boxing. Yeah, that's business of boxing. It is what it is. It's life. But that's the real story inside it. I cover it. I got Erika Cruz in here when nobody knows her, and when she was about to get that fight against which is in your book, the Canadian Jalmelo is it Jalmelo? And she had the opportunity. She went and earned it. She really did. She won the fight the right way. She got her out of control and work it out. That's good. But now look what happened. Now, the other thing Amanda Serrano is aiming is also for the record of knockouts that Christy Martin have. She want to earn that record. She want to work it, the record of knockouts. I think Christy got 33 and Amanda got 30. So things are telling us that she's going to try to knock out Jamilet this weekend on Sunday. So we'll see what happens. But
we'll see.
At the end of the day, you think the Puerto Rican Amanda Serrano be on top above a Riker and a Christy Martin, or always Christy Martin going to be that top fighter?
It's kind of hard to say. In a way, it's mixed metaphors because of the era. I always have a hard time with doing that cross through the eras, because for the era they were remarkable. I don't know that Christy Martin or Lucia Riker, for that matter, would have the careers they had then now. Hard to say. So it's kind of hard for me to go there. Certainly in her generation, Amanda Serrano has every opportunity to be number one over Katie Taylor, over Clarissa Shields. We'll see how this all works out as their careers advance. But yeah, Christy Martin has 32 KOs. So Amanda has two to catch up and one more to go over
To
the
go over.
record. So
Yes.
we'll see how that all works out. But certainly Amanda is the real deal. And that's what she calls herself, the real deal, Amanda
The
Serrano.
real deal.
And she really is. She's truly an exceptional fighter, and she lives boxing. And she's, in one sense, fortunate because of the support of her family. She's able to just box, and that's luxury that most women do not have in the sport. But she has that dedication from her sister Cindy, who is a brilliant boxer in her own right during her era, and her brother-in-law, and is able to dedicate her life to the sport 24/7, 365 days of the year. And that's what it takes to succeed, to get to the elite level. In a way, it reminds me of Sergio Martinez from Argentina, who just lived boxing 24/7.
Malissa, I appreciate you being in here with me for this. We went over the hour, and I wanted probably to repeat this so we have a lot to talk and we have different conversations because I know you're a great a historian of the woman boxing. I really appreciate, and I know my people will appreciate this conversation and this learning. And also, one more time, your book. If people haven't seen it, it's available everywhere in Amazon and all places. All you got to put is that name, A History of Women's Boxing, right? And look for
That's
it.
right.
Talk to us a little bit where people can follow you in the social media and also about girlboxing.org, which is your blog.
Sure. So I am at Girl Boxing Now on Twitter and Instagram. That's where I am most active. Instagram tends to be more of sort of my own personal story and my journey as a 67-year-old person in a gym. Crazy, but I'm there. And then I also, will have big fights there. On Twitter, I do a lot of reporting on the sport. I live tweet certain bouts. Like I was live tweeting the Cali respout whenever I can. I live tweet bouts, and then as I said, I just have different boxing content from. I will retweet articles by people like David Avila and Thomas Grabowski and all my other pals in the boxing world. We'll retweet Women Fight News. They do a really beautiful job of having weekly lists of all the fights that are coming out, a lot of interviews, and then I have my blog girlboxing.org. Admittedly, I've been kind of lean on the content lately, but I'll be picking it up to weekly stories starting in the fall. And typically, I do at least one interview every month or so with a fighter, whether it's Q&A or going out to wherever they're boxing, wherever they're training, getting ready for a fight. So that's where to find me. I'm also have a page on Facebook, which is Girl Boxing.
And you also are part of the Ring Magazine Pound for Pound panelists, right?
Yeah, I'm very honored to be a member of the Ring Magazine Ratings Committee.
Hmm.
We do all the rankings for both all of the individual weight classes and the pound for pound list. And I'm also on the board with the International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame. We just had our eighth event where we in Las Vegas, and we had the opportunity to honor 2020 and 2021 inductees who were able to come in person to our event. I'll just put a plug for that and say, if you want further information on that, go to www.iwbhf.com and you'll learn everything there is to know about the International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame, and get a lot of content on former boxers and get some real feel for the history of the sport and women's boxers who you may not have heard of, but who were sensational in their time.
Yep. So, and also you got a little part on the men's Hall of Fame, the International Hall of Fame, the
Yes,
kind of program.
Yeah, I'm that also on the International Boxing Hall of Fame. I'm on the selection committee for modern women boxers and the Trailblazers, um, and I'm also a voting member. So it's just the coolest thing ever. I got to tell you, if you told me even 20 years ago that I would have these honors, I would never have believed it. And the
In
day
the
that, yeah, go ahead.
in the Ring Magazine voting committee, you also are accompanied by a Puerto Rican, right? Is a,
I think
I think it's a Puerto Rican in there too. In
Yeah, well,
the.
there's Diego Morello. Morello, he's great. He's sort of our leader. We have people from all over. Jessica
Mhm,
Powell.
mhm,
Uh, we have Argentina represented. I believe Puerto Rico, certainly
mhm.
Mexico, Japan, United States. I mean, we really try to have an international flavor because in women's boxing in particular, there are many female champions or women who are at poised to become champions who are from Mexico, Argentina, different parts of Europe and Asia. So we really try to reflect different perspectives and points of view, and also different expertise on the local markets and women that we should be looking at very carefully in terms of their fights.
So one more time, I appreciate it, and I thank you for being here with me all this time, an hour and 17 minutes now. I want to have you back really because we got to talk about the diversity of women's boxing. I know when you went through those 260 pages, I know you got more to write because I know you saw the diversity. But really, I appreciate that you was here with me all this time, and I hope to have you back, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cesar, for having me on your show. I'm really honored that you have, sought me out, and I'm a hammy, so I love to talk about women's boxing. It's my passion and something I really strongly believe all of us should have an awareness of and support. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.